Today we're gonna do part 2 of my 3-part Picasso series. So, Pablo Ruiz Picasso was born in Spain, like we learned about before, and he lived most of his life in France. He is most well known for co-founding with George Braque, the Cubist movement. Picasso did lots of things. He did lots of different kinds of art. One of those kinds of art was Surrealism. The whole point of Surrealism was to kind of figure out your dreams and your imagination. And Surrealism was a movement that tried to help grown-ups tap into their imagination and bring it to life. One of the things Picasso loved and always tried to do is try to become more like a child, try to produce art that was simple and exciting and fresh. Every time you put pen to paper, you can put your imagination down and be part of the Surrealism movement. Between 1907 and 1912, somewhere in there, Picasso and his friend George Braque founded the movement, the Cubist movement, Cubism, where they used monochromatic colors, meaning browns, like they would take a brown and they would use shades of brown, like dark brown to light brown, or black and white. And so they would take black and grays all the way down to white. They would use a monochromatic scale. They would look at an object and they would break it down into its basic shapes. What George Braque and Picasso loved to do is they would find an animal or a person or an object, and they would break it down into its shapes, look at it from one perspective, and then they'd turn it a little bit, and then they'd draw it from that perspective, and then they'd turn it a little bit again, and they'd draw it on the same piece of paper. So you would have the front of a person, almond-shaped eyes, a triangular nose maybe, a funny mouth smiling, and then they would turn the person like this to the profile. So you have a triangular nose again, and then you'd have another almond eye, and then you'd have a funny face. And they would take the body, and they would have a trapezoid shape as the torso, or a circular shape, an oval shape as the head, and then they would turn it, and they would turn it. And so all on the same paper, you would have all kinds of shapes all over the place. They just love to break things down. This is called Analytic Cubism, where they analyzed an object and broke it down into its basic shapes. The result of breaking everything down into their basic shapes and putting everything on the same page, all of the different facets of a person or of an object like a picture or an animal, is that you would have kind of a fragmented look, almost like you took a mirror and you shattered it, and all of the pieces scattered, and then you just grouped them all back up together. And so you had little pieces here and there. You'd have an eye here, you'd have an arm here, you'd have a torso around here. It's all a fragmented painting. From 1912 to 1919, they started going towards synthetic cubism. They would get newspapers or magazines or some material, like go get that piece of material or the newspaper, and they'd cut it into shapes. And then they would create their paintings with these different fragments. It would be made out of newspaper, and they would bring all of these different pieces together. And that is synthetic cubism. Synthetic cubism was the first collage in art, taking all kinds of different pieces and putting them all together, mashing them up, and creating something amazing. I'm going to talk about a painting that Picasso did that is considered the most moving and powerful anti-war painting ever made. This painting is titled Guernica. There was a civil war in the 1930s. During the Spanish Civil War, General Francisco Franco, who was a Spanish nationalist, requested German and Italian forces to bomb the Basque town of Guernica. After this happened, Picasso was commissioned, that means he was asked, by the Republican government of Spain to produce a mural for the Spanish pavilion at the World Fair in Paris. This was a massive painting. Picasso painted Guernica in 1 month, from May to June 1937, right after the bombing of Guernica. Guernica became the centerpiece of the Spanish pavilion and the sensation at the fair. Guernica was consequently banned from the exhibition in Spain until the military dictator Franco fell from power in 1975. After he died, it came out, and now it is one of the most beloved anti-war paintings that we have. Because Picasso lived in France during World War II, he saw Gestapo. They would come into his studio, they would harass him, but he kept going, and one day a German Gestapo soldier entered Picasso's apartment, his studio, and he saw a photograph of Guernica, and he said, "Did you do this?" Picasso replied, "No, you did." Throughout the war, Picasso kept creating art. For a time during World War II, the Germans outlawed bronze casting. Picasso continued sculpting regardless of the danger. He had bronze smuggled to him by the French Resistance. Picasso was actually famous in his own lifetime. He sculpted, he painted everything from his life experiences. There was war, there was death, there was depression, there was love and romance. And today we're going to practice analytical cubism. I want you to look closely at this figure. This was from my childhood when I was a little girl. I got this nutcracker from my grandmother. One of the reasons I like nutcrackers is that they're already broken down into simple shapes. Let's look at these shapes very quickly. First, we have kind of a squashed oval shape for his head. Then we have a teardrop nose. Now, if I turn it, look at that funny nose. It's so crazy. Then we have this crown, little zigzag at the top, a circle. Here his torso is almost like a trapezoid, rounded half circle here. Then his legs are just rectangles or cylinders. His feet are just little squares. Then his arm comes out and it's a cylinder, little funny trapezoid down here at the bottom for the cuff of his jacket. And then a circle for his hands. Look at this. And then I'm gonna turn him. And you're gonna paint him again. The little lever that makes the nutcracker's mouth open and close. You could draw the lever coming out, or you could do the same nose on the outside of his head. One thing I think you should consider doing is moving his arms. So if you have a rectangle here, move it out like this. Or you could when we turn him, you could move a foot forward, a leg forward, so it looks like he's walking or marching. Look at him, and then I'm going to turn him. I have my paper here. I chose a light gray. I'm gonna do an ellipse for the head, or a squash circle. Then I'm going to do a teardrop for the nose. I'm gonna put his crown on, full zigzag shape, trapezoid body, half circle where his coat is, 2 long rectangles for his legs, 2 smaller rectangles for his feet, 2 rectangles for his arms with a little circle at the bottom to show his hands. I might do some crazy hair. And then I'm going to turn him. And this time I want to make him look like he's marching. I'm gonna angle his arm the different way, make a new nose, and I'm going to put eyes on him, his mustache, his goatee, and his hair crazy again. And I am going to do the nutcracker lever at the back. Color a few of them in, but not all of them. Take a cotton swab or my finger, smudge out some of it so it's a softer look. There's my painting. Now I'm gonna show you what my kids did. First, my youngest, he just did crazy lines all over the place, lots of different colors. And he took a cotton swab and he smudged it a little bit in here to create a little bit more interest. This happens to be one of my favorites. So you can see in here, there's a little bit of gray. That was the first nutcracker. And then he turned it and he started doing a blue nutcracker. Then he colored that in a little bit and then he decided to turn it a little bit more. He did a red nutcracker. This time it kind of makes it look like it's dancing. There's a lot of movement in this. It's exciting. You can see all the different layers of colors where the red and the blue cross becomes purple. The next one decided to do his first nutcracker again was in gray. Then he turned it, made it in blue. This one is marching out and there is rectangle feet that way. So it looks like he's sideways. These are the ones facing forward. Then he decided to color just a little bit of green and red. Boots are all black. He breaks things into different shapes and moves the nutcracker different directions. This one is very delicate and it doesn't have a lot of shading, and that's just great. First, again, was the gray. You can see she put pink hair and a pink goatee. Then she turned it, the lever back here. She's brought the arms out almost like he's gonna punch something or he's marching, and here's his goatee out that direction and here's a foot coming out that way. I love all of the varieties. Analytical cubism is for you to learn how to break things down into simple shapes. You can put it all together and it can be wild and crazy or it can be calm and sedate. All of this has to do with you and the emotion you put into it. That's our project for today. Now for the inspiration. Only put off until tomorrow what you are willing to die having left undone. Inspiration exists, but it has to find you working. If I paint a wild horse, you might not see the horse, but surely you will see the wildness. I love that you'll see the wildness. You'll feel the emotion. You can almost sense the galloping of a horse, blur of movement that would come from analytical cubism. Art principle of the day, we're gonna talk about shading. The first is hatching. Take your pencil in the same direction. You can go top to bottom, bottom to top, but the same direction, same diagonal lines, you hatch and you create these lines that are next to each other. And the closer they get or the harder you press, the darker it gets. Cross hatching, similar principle, diagonal lines going in one direction and then you change that direction and go the opposite direction, almost like you create a pattern. The third is tonal. Take the very edge of your pencil, shade really lightly, and the more you go over it, the darker it'll get. It's a really soft way to shade. Stippling. To stipple, you take the point of your pencil or your charcoal or your oil pastel, does really well. You just do dots. And the closer the dots get together, the darker the area gets. Next is scumbling. To scumble, you take a pen or a pencil and you just kind of scribble. You just scribble back and forth, scribble back and forth. You go over it and over and over it, and you start really light, and the more scumbling you put on top of it, the darker that area gets. The last thing that I'm going to talk about is smudging. When you smudge, do some lines with your pencil, take your finger, a cotton swab, or there are other fancier things that you can use, but you take your finger and you just smudge it. The lines disappear and all you have is a smudge of pencil lead. That will start to create shading. Color really darkly with your pencil and then smudge that, and it's really dark. You can go really lightly and then smudge that just barely. Those are 6 basic ways to shade. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, I need those likes. Come back again for part 3 of Picasso.